Several weeks ago, I was doing the daily New York Times connections with my girlfriend. One of the easier groupings from that particular game was words for backside, including booty, bum, can, and rear. She and I agreed that can, while correct, didn't really fit with backside as much as the other three. And we started thinking about what other words could have possibly gone in there. And we came up with words like tookus and keister, which led me to wonder a very normal human thing to wonder. What's the origin of the word keister? So I looked up keister, clicked on the Wikipedia page, and there it was. At the very top of the list of people with the name Keister, I saw something incredible. Abraham Lincoln Keister. What majesty, what elegance in naming. Truly this man had a name more coveted than any other. A name that portrays strength, respect, and dignity. And comic relief in the form of a butt joke. But something didn't sit right with me. Scrolling through his page left me with one simple question that Wikipedia was ill-equipped to answer. Abraham Lincoln Keister was an American congressman representing the 22nd District of Pennsylvania from 1913 to 1917. He was born in 1852 to parents Solomon and Sarah Keister in Upper Tyrone, Pennsylvania, about 40 miles from Pittsburgh. He attended public school before going off to attend Otterbein University in Westerville, Ohio. He studied law, was admitted to the bar, and began practice in Columbus before returning to his home county of Westmoreland in Pennsylvania in 1882. From there, he began working in the manufacturing of coke, as in coal coke. He served as an important figure in the local community, founding the First National Bank of Scottdale and Scottdale Savings and Trust, and he served on the Scottdale Board of Education for 20 years. In 1912, he was elected to Congress as a Republican and served 2 terms before losing his bid for re-election in 1916. He returned to Scottdale, where he passed away only a few months later. If you were to look up Mr. Keister right now and do some surface-level research, that's about all you'd find out. Which isn't too strange. I mean, it was the 1800s, and he was barely even a congressman. And hey, step 2 of researching a congressman is easy. Just go diving into the congressional record. They'll have every vote he cast, every vote he missed, all his committee assignments. But here's the thing. That's all well and good, but none of that answers my one question. The question that immediately came to mind when I stumbled upon his Wikipedia page. The one question that led me to do more research than I've done since college. Why is his name Abraham Lincoln Keister? Now I know what you're thinking. He was named after the president. Duh, case closed. But not so fast. Keister was born in 1852. Could he really have been named after Lincoln 8 years before he ran for president? Would he really have been that popular in the early 1850s for a random family in rural Pennsylvania 3 states away to name their child after him? It's certainly possible, but not something that can just be assumed. Which means, if I wanted a satisfactory answer to my question, I was going to have to work for it. So, I delved deep into Google and the annals of history to find census data, random articles on local history, and the history of the Church of the United Brethren. Anything that could lead to more info on Mr. Keister. I was going to have to find primary sources. And I certainly found a few, from old newspaper scans and emails with major university professors to books with exciting titles like A Genealogical Record of the Descendants of Martin Oberholzer. So come with me as I follow each of my 4 working theories into an inevitable dead end. Come with me as I get to the bottom of this. And I'll try to avoid slipping in more butt puns. Part 1. He was named after the president. Duh, case closed. Just because we can't assume it's the right answer, doesn't mean it's not still the most likely one. Maybe Lincoln was more well known in 1852 than I thought at first. Or maybe Keister's parents were really strong abolitionists. Looking into the latter of those 2 points is not unlikely. Throughout Keister's life, he was associated with the Church of the United Brethren, which was strongly anti-slavery, removing all slave owners from the church membership in 1837. Is what I initially wrote for this script. That's what the Wikipedia page for the church says, with no citation, as well as official websites for the church and its modern incarnation, the United Methodist Church. There's a few too many brethren churches out there, confusing the whole research process for me to really be bothered verifying this claim beyond the obviously biased churches themselves. We're just going to run with the assumption that the churches aren't lying about themselves. Keister attended a Union Brethren university during his studies, and in one of his obituaries was noted as attending and being associated with the Jacobs Creek Union Brethren Church in Scottdale. Heck, his maternal grandparents J.W. and Catherine Stauffer actually played a key role in founding that specific church back in 1822, which means it's very likely that he was baptized there. If only I could find a baptismal record. We don't know exactly to what extent Keister's parents would have thought of themselves as abolitionists, but it's within the realm of possibility. So, how likely is it that Abraham L. Keister's parents just so happened to name him after a man who would go on to become the most well-respected man in American history? Was Abraham Lincoln really that well known in 1852? Fortunately, researching Abraham Lincoln is much easier than Keister. In 1852, Abraham Lincoln was a former one-term congressman from Illinois. If he were well known and respected by a random rural Pennsylvania family, then it would probably be for something he had done during that term, right? Well, in 1848, he won the Whig Party nomination to the seat, basically promising to serve only one term. At the time, tradition was the seat would rotate between more powerful party bigwigs. Easily his most reported on incident while in Congress was his harsh rebuke of President Polk and the Mexican-American War, for which Lincoln was heavily criticized. He also pushed for outlawing slavery in Washington, D.C., and in the territory conquered from Mexico via the Wilmot Proviso. Neither of which were successful. He refused to run for re-election as he had promised, and eager to keep his name in the papers, instead spent 1848 campaigning on behalf of Whig presidential candidate Zachary Taylor. But not in Pennsylvania, or in the nearby states of Ohio and Virginia. According to the Library of Congress's Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Exhibition, if Lincoln had not been drawn out of a self-imposed retirement from politics following his single disappointing term in the House of Representatives, he would only be remembered, if at all, as a good trial lawyer from the state of Illinois. In his 2009 biography of Abraham Lincoln, Ronald White wrote, from 1489 to 1489? God damn it. In his 2009 biography on Abraham Lincoln, Ronald White writes about Lincoln's withdrawal from public life, saying, from 1849 to 1854, Lincoln would cultivate a profound interior life. To give you one last indication of how well thought of Abraham Lincoln was when Keister was born, in 1852, the year of Keister's birth, Lincoln made his first appearance in the New York Times. That was it. We're calling that. I'll either splice it together or I'll use that one take. In an article covering the 1852 Whig National Convention, Abraham Lincoln was mentioned. Once. At the very end. In a list of National Committee members. That's how much the New York Times thought to mention the future president in 1852. Then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning and said, wait a minute, did anyone give a damn about the New York Times in 1852? Lo and behold, they did not. The New York Times was founded in 1851. Nevertheless, the point stands that in 1852, a newspaper in the city of New York did not think highly enough of Abraham Lincoln to give him a single sentence of coverage. And if a political center like New York City didn't care, why can we expect a rural family in Pennsylvania to care? Ronald White writes that in 1854, 2 years after Keister's birth, Lincoln gave a speech in the city of Peoria, Illinois, lambasting common arguments about slavery using the Declaration of Independence. It was this speech, according to White, that began to spread the word about Lincoln beyond Illinois, clearly indicating that prior to that time, he truly was a bit of a nobody to the rest of the country. Part 2. He and Lincoln were named after the same man. It's very possible that prior to the rise of President Lincoln, there was a third man with the same name who was famous enough at the time that two unrelated families from different ends of the country would have both chosen to name their sons after. Once again, we can thank President Lincoln for being so famous that research on him has already been done and is pretty easy. Abraham Lincoln was named after his grandfather, Captain Abraham Lincoln, who fought with the Virginia militia in the Revolutionary War. At first, this might seem like the answer. A Revolutionary War hero? That's gotta be the guy, right? Well, sources on the matter indicate that Captain Lincoln, while successful in his stint in the military, wasn't particularly fond of it as a lifestyle. He felt the call of the pioneer beckoning him westward. From there, he lived a simple life in Kentucky until he was killed by an Indian at the age of 42. Are you really mowing? Right now? This video's audio is gonna suck anyway. Not exactly a heroic death worthy of remembrance either. He was simply out in his field and was shot from the trees. To make matters worse for us, the story comes off not as some grand legend you could imagine being spread across the country, but as an old family story. It reads like a tale that President Lincoln's father told him as a kid, and is now passing on to a curious reporter who asked about his name. Not to mention that, according to the various genealogy websites, there seems to be no family connection either. So while we can't rule this out as a potential origin for Mr. Keister's name, it seems highly unlikely to me at this point. Part 3. It was a coincidence. Since beginning this project, I've learned that Abraham was a much more common name in the 1800s than I had thought. I shouldn't be surprised, after all. People used to love biblical names. Heck, his dad's name was Solomon. Look at this website. Does this website make you think you're looking in the right place? I'm sorry, Mr. Lusher, but your 2008 website does not bring me confidence. Psych! This website not only has more info on A.L. Keister than Wikipedia or Congress, but it's better sourced too. This project has really taught me to respect simple hobbyist websites. Everyone say thank you, Mr. Lusher. Anyway, Mr. Lusher's website led me to this. A genealogical record of the descendants of Martin Oberholzer. Who is Martin Oberholzer? Aside from some guy who died at 35, I don't know. Why does such a book exist? Aside from a curious family member wishing to document their heritage, I would never hazard a guess. Why does the book say he died at 39 when the dates provided clearly indicate he was 35? I don't know. All I do know is that according to this book, following the line of Mr. Oberholzer's second son Henrik through his third daughter Anna and her eldest daughter Catherine and her eldest daughter Sarah, we find Mr. A.L. Keister, born 1852, living in Scottdale, PA. Thus, this book is a record of everyone on his mother's side of the family. Scrolling through the document, you can see that Abraham is by no means an uncommon name. It's well within the realm of possibility that he was simply named this because it just seemed like a reasonable name to give a kid. But what it doesn't explain is why is his middle name Lincoln? Insofar as I have read of this book, there are no family members named Lincoln. And in what research I was able to do on genealogical websites on his father's side, I found no Lincolns there either. And that shouldn't be too surprising. Lincoln as a name derives from the English city of Lincoln. LinkedIn? What the frick? And that shouldn't be surprising. Lincoln as a name derives from the English city of Lincoln, and its popularity today is almost certainly due to its association with the president. Both sides of Mr. Keister's family appear to be very strongly German in heritage, with little to no inclusion of non-German families. Which, again, is not surprising, given the love German speakers seem to have had for Western Pennsylvania. So it's probably not a family name. Maybe there was some old family friend that Solomon and Sarah Keister decided to name their son after? Heck, if we're inventing hypothetical family friends, it could still be President Lincoln. We know for a fact that Abraham Lincoln's family had a branch in Pennsylvania at the time, though mostly in eastern Pennsylvania. Alas, there's basically no way to prove this, barring the uncovering of a personal document of A.L. Keister's parents describing their good friend Mr. Lincoln, or perhaps one mentioning a Mr. Lincoln attending their church. We're never going to be able to actually say, without a shadow of a doubt, the naming of Abraham Lincoln Keister was a coincidence. Which leaves us with just one option, which I think is the most likely. Part 4. He named himself after Abraham Lincoln. Picture this. The year is 1852. Solomon and Sarah Keister have a baby boy whom they decide to name Abraham. A common family name for the baby's mother, and a biblical name, which appeals to them both. No middle name was given, as middle names were not yet standard in America. Fast forward to 1860. Abraham Lincoln is probably elected president? What? Fast forward to 1860. Abraham Lincoln is elected president. Little Abraham Keister is perhaps fond of him. His family is probably already anti-slavery and may come to think very highly of him in the next few years. Until, 5 years later, when Keister is 12 years old, the president is shot. Devastated by the death of the most revered man in the country, he adopts Lincoln as his new middle name, encouraging the use of his new middle initial for the rest of his life. That sounds like a solid story to me. At one point early on in my research, I thought I had proven this theory, at least enough to satiate my curiosity, before I had fallen into the rabbit hole. Thanks to the effort of family genealogists, it's not hard to find Mr. Keister in the 1860, 1870, 1900, and 1910 U.S. censuses. What I noticed in this data is that in the 1860 and 1870 censuses, Mr. Keister is listed only as Abraham Keister, while in 1900 and 1910, he was listed Abraham L. Keister.
Checkmate, atheists.
But that doesn't really prove anything. First off, the census doesn't specifically request middle initials until the 1890 census, so while some census takers may have been more thorough and gotten those anyway, it's very possible that the census taker who came to the Keister farm in 1860 and 1870 just didn't care enough to write it down. And that is on top of the fact that in 1860, Keister was 8. No way he was filling out his own census. In 1870, he was 18 living with his parents. His father may have filled out both of those censuses for the whole family and not bothered with middle initials. It wasn't his name.
Regardless, Keister was a lifelong Republican. Was it really so hard to believe he gave himself that middle name? I don't think so. After all, it's not like he was the only one running around with that name at that point.
Just look at all these people named after Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s. Abraham Lincoln Coon, Abraham Lincoln Eisenhower, Abraham Lincoln Porter, Abraham Lincoln McMaster, Abraham Lincoln Shirk, Abraham Lincoln Smith, Abraham Lincoln Gifford. Wait, this guy is just named Abraham Keister, and he's from Pennsylvania. Is he related? It doesn't look like it. This guy's named Abraham Keister too. It's spelled wrong, but he's from Westmoreland County like A.L. Keister. But these guys were both born in 1820. Are these duplicate entries? No, they're different. But either one of these guys could have been friends with Solomon and Sarah. But that doesn't mean anything, right? We need evidence for Lincoln. Abraham Jefferson Keister? He's named after a completely different president. Wait, that one actually makes sense, though. No, none of this proves anything! Am I destined to never know?
Yeah, I think I am. And I'm okay with that. Thanks for watching.
But then, after finishing this script, while compiling my sources for this video, I found a combination of search terms that I hadn't used yet, and found this. A 1980 court case document detailing the drama between union workers and the Keister Coal Company held by one Jack Keister, surely a relative, right? A descendant of one of A.L. Keister's brothers. Maybe I can find him, or his children, and they can help me, right? They might have all the family heirlooms and stories about Grandpa Ben and his brother Abraham, right? Right? Look, here's his obituary. Now I can find him on his family tree and... Nope. Not related. Just some other Keister family.
To Keister. I taste all 23 flavors.